respond, then I'll come back and on another issue.
Well, I can talk a little bit more about the veterans issues. You know, Washington State, I don't know if you know Patrick Seifert, he's part of an organization, 22, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. In Washington State, there's an organization called Weed for Warriors. That's a national organization, right? In Washington, it's 22 too many, and that's a Patrick Seifert's organization. And you know, talking about 22 veterans are killing themselves every day, committing suicide, and that's something that when I first heard about that statistic, jaw drops, and it's just you can't believe that that's happening to our veterans that are going over there. And then you start to meet some of these veterans, and hey, this kid's 20 years old and he's missing a leg, and he used to be an athlete, and now his life's over as he knows it, and he's got to find something different. And traumatic stress, PTSD, just getting that added as a condition for cannabis. Some states it is, some states it isn't. That's a big part of it. I would say this, I've got a friend of my wife's, actually she works with the VA down in St. Pete, and she talks to me, Carl, what can we do, what we do, but again, all the doctors, their hands are tied, even at the VA, because of the federal policy. And so it just comes down to, changing the policies. It comes down to awareness. It comes down to being a voice and, representing this industry well, which is why I wore a suit today, because I want to be a good representative of this industry. And you guys will see me with my shorts and flip-flops out at the pool later on today. But, being a good representative, going to city halls and public town councils and, those kinds of things.
Did your wife at Bay Pines?
I'm sorry?
Did your wife at Bay Pines?
At Bay Pines?
Bay Pines VA said the 16.
I think that's probably the name of it. It's her wife's friend.
That's where I go. So if there's anything I can do at that facility to maybe try to advocate for this bill.
Yeah, let's talk afterwards. I'll give you my information and I can put you in touch with her. But just getting out there and doing as much as you can to lobby and to educate. And for the veterans, you're talking about the therapeutic values of growing a plant at home. I mean, I love to grow cannabis. It is so much fun to see these, and making clones and every aspect of it. I haven't grown cannabis in years because I'm in Florida now. It's federally illegal, and I have a family, and I can't jeopardize what they're doing. And so, but if you want to home grow, I mean that's a whole other conversation that's not even on the table here. But if you want to talk about looking at medicinal and rec, and when patients are paying taxes on their medicine, that's the part that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. This is America. We should be able to do the land of the free, home of the brave. And, if I want to grow a plant in my yard, and this guy can go and brew his home brewed liquor, or have his stills, or it's just got to get out there and educate you guys and be an advocate and represent this industry well. That's why.
In Colorado, where each adult over 21 can grow 3 plants.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And they're actually.
So if you have 3 adults, that's 9 plants.
Yeah, we're working on legislation in Florida called Regulate Florida, which would be a minimum of 6 plants per adult 21 plus in the house. And what we mean by minimum is that a municipality such as Sarasota County could not say you can only grow 3 or you can only grow 1. They have to have a minimum of 6.
For when are you anticipating that?
We have petitions out now. We were looking to get on the ballot in 2020. We are at judicial review for the petition. So we're over 100,000. So over the next 2 years, we're going to be collecting another 900,000 petitions, and we should see that on the ballot in 2020.
So if you could get your veterans to work with an organization like Pete's, or to help to draft some legislation, hey, what do you guys want? And now, what do you guys have? Well, you guys have a lot of people, and they can go out there and get signatures. And they
So
can
I hear what you guys are saying, and I'm gonna be real clear on this. So I asked, how do we get into the industry, and how does the industry change and help that out? That's not answered, and that's the problem. That's literally the problem. All you guys, it's great input, and we love it. But the issue is that the funding behind veterans to help them lobby, do all that, is not there.
Well, you
The
have
industry
to-
wants to say, we'll help you out all day long, but then they don't
Well,
come to the
There's
table.
no federal money that's gonna go.
I'll tell you one thing that might be able to help, that you might be able to help with on the veteran side. And I've had a lot of experience with veterans groups over the past 4 years. Be cohesive. Don't have 900 different veterans groups all arguing for a different thing.
I agree
And
100%.
that has really been one of the biggest obstacles that we've had in this state. I work with Weed for Warriors, Buds for Vets, what's it, Mission Zero, and everybody's got a different agenda. Some won't support anything that doesn't have home grow attached to it, which I get 100%, but you also have to understand baby steps and how policy has changed. So we've tried, under Bob Jordan a couple of years ago, we tried something called Veterans United. Let's get all the veterans groups together, in one room and hammer this out. We were unsuccessful in doing that. There was still a lot of arguing. But from a veteran standpoint, I see an enormous amount of passion, enormous amount, more than any other demographic that I see out there. And if that passion can be channeled into some sort of cohesive message, not splintered in a lot of different directions, I think that a lot more movement could be made. And I would say, if you haven't talked to Dr. Sue, who's presenting next door just yet, talk to her. She's been working with veterans for a long time, and she has spearheaded a lot of different studies with veterans as well. So there's definitely a conversation you're going to want to have as well, and she can tell you some similar things.
As you know, the federal money until things change is not gonna go there. There's always concerns, but I would urge you, I think you heard Representative Rodriguez this morning, we've been advocating, so we work with the Florida legislature, actively on this issue, and we're gonna be working on this piece of legislation for next year. Certainly could be funding for, job development, training, access. We gotta change this vertical integration piece so that everybody can find pieces that they do well in this space. That's fundamental, that's gotta change. Similarly, there's product diversification, like we mentioned earlier. You may have a great group that's got a product that you really that think works well, ice cream, whatever the case may be, but you can't get into that space because it's gotta happen under an MMTC license now. But they need product diversification. You go into these dispensaries, they got 12 things. Because they don't want to grow so much. I mean, really, they don't know what the demand's going to be for the products. So they're doing 4 that they know will buy. But that's going to change as well for a variety of reasons. So I think one of the things, as Pete mentioned, I don't know if you're going to have everybody on the same page. We're going to tell Representative Rodriguez, we're going to develop a list of glitch fixes. Let's send the rest of us. Give you our email and let's just plug it in, And then when this starts in the fall after the elections, there are a lot of people who really support veterans issues.
Yeah.
Frankly, the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs in the state of Florida, I know very, very well. He really supports us. He knows kind of where the dynamics are. He'd be a great advocate as well, I think, on these issues.
I think from a business standpoint, just really quickly, from a business standpoint, businesses don't really like to be told what to do, especially by the government. They can't stand that. But this is a win-win for everybody across the board. So you have, like you said, you have a group of people that are very high functioning, who were very high functioning, and can execute these, can actually do this work. You have an industry that doesn't have, trained staff just yet, right? So it makes a lot of sense for them. And for me, my marketing mind goes to PR. How can I spin this? And you can see different companies like different automotive companies making it very public that they're hiring veterans, right? Because it fits their brand image, right? So you're going to see a lot more of that. So you see, as you see, veterans are going to be get a lot of benefit out of this plan. So they're going to be some of the bigger evangelists, and I think that we're going to see a lot of the businesses leaning onto that. And whether it be for their own, self-promotion, at the end of the day, it's still going to be good for everybody involved.
Next question. Sir, in the corner, and then we'll do you next.
So back to federal policy, with Canada on the verge of going recreational, how do you guys see that affecting banking regulations in the United States, especially for, TD Bank or large banks in the United States that have their management groups in Canada? Do you see that? How do you see that playing out in the near future?
I'll leave that one here.
So, yeah, the issue of, so as I mentioned before, The issue of banking and payments when it comes to marijuana are both problems. They sometimes overlap, but they are distinct issues, and a lot of times they get conflated. The marijuana payments issue is related in some part to the fact that these businesses, by and large, don't have bank accounts. But it's also complicated by the fact that, as I mentioned, credit cards and debit card network transactions are not permitted for any marijuana-related transaction. That does not mean that they do not occur, but when they do occur, I'm hesitant to use the word fraud, but it is in effect a misrepresentation, because when every credit card transaction has to have a merchant code that says what the transaction was. There are no such codes for any marijuana transactions, which mean you are describing it as something other than what it is. So you can call that what you want. But the bottom line is that most transactions therefore take place in cash. The banking issue is, again, somewhat related, but also distinct. Yes, it has an issue about where you house all this money, but the banking issue goes well beyond just where you put the money, because a bank account is something that we all take for granted, and every other business takes for granted, but it really is one of the primary things that enables a business to operate like a business. In addition to the cash, you can send and receive checks and wires, you can pay taxes electronically, you can automate your payroll. Again, all the other things that every other business and industry in this country takes for granted, this industry can't do, and it can't, or at least can't do it easily. In fact, I think it's a miracle that the industry is actually doing as well as it is, given the fact that it is being frozen out of so many services that we all take for granted. But just to get back to your point, so one of the ways that some people or some businesses or some quote unquote solutions try to address this issue of banking access and payments is to use offshore or overseas financial institutions. I cannot underscore enough what a bad idea that is. And so whenever I talk to a marijuana industry or someone that's involved in the industry and tell them that if they are ever approached by somebody that says that they can solve their payments or their banking issue, and that if any part of that involves money going across our borders, I tell them to turn and run as far and as fast away as possible. Not to get too into the weeds, money laundering laws treat international transactions much differently and much more severely than domestic transactions. So, if you take nothing away from anything that I've said, do not ever engage in international transactions as a way to either engage in, to facilitate transactions or to obtain banking access.
This gentleman's next, and you're.
Should we assume that the vertical integration will be broken sooner or later, but just a question of when, or is it possible this is going to be the
Assume nothing.
No,
I mean, if that's the end of your question, I mean, interrupt you, but assume nothing, but I think the voice of both patients, physicians, in the industry, it's certainly pushing in that direction. The key issue for the legislature, and they started conservatively, they loosened up a little bit, but the issue from law enforcement and others is this chain of control of the product, right? Someone's got to be legally liable or responsible for that product throughout seed to sale through transaction. So that was put into the format where the vertical integration, you're responsible, Mr. MMTC or Mr. MMTC. Some can function that way, but really at the end of the day, that has got to be, it happens everywhere. It happens in a lot of different industries. So you got to break that up without shattering it, but allow certain relationships, legal relationships to exist within that licensing structure that has liability protection. I mean, that happens everywhere, right? So if you want to be a dispensary, not a grower, or you want to provide a security service, or if you want to do, provide off-site, clone development under the relationship, the legal relationship. But I think that's probably where this needs to go. We're just starting to have this conversation. When we get done with this, Business Association sends out twice a week newsletters on kind of policy issues, political changes, what's happening around the state. If you want to get it, when it's free, you can get it. We'll give you that, you sign up and get it. So you kind of keep it keeps track of the trends for at the state level and around the state. So I would think it's a big priority this year, and I think I'd give it a 70% probability.
You should predict within 10 years,
Next year. Next year.
next year.
This legislature will come back to town after the election in January. And the legislative session runs March 3, it's 60 days totally. They will be meeting, and as you heard, the majority leader of the House of Representatives is Ray Rodriguez. He's been the architect of this legislation in the past. He sees it, he heard from a lot of people. I think there are some key issues that, this is one of them probably, that need to be included in that. So everybody needs to be an advocate with a positive message about what needs to be done and why. So that's why these conferences are very helpful, and we'll continue to promote that. Yeah, I'm talking too much. Okay, go ahead.
Just the issue of credit card, debit card cross payments, and the issue you described as the, not fraud, but phrase you used, specifically to the certification made by a physician, how that is characterized properly, and is that problem applicable to CBD retail sales only? It's only CBD?
Yeah, I can't speak to the.
Take notes on this.
Oh, no, well, you're gonna be disappointed. Yeah,
John told me it was okay. What's his cell phone number?
My lawyer. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I don't know, obviously, the medical issues are unique to, it's a unique area outside the financial, and I don't know if it implicates the same issues, so. I'd be hesitant.
Then just on the retail sale of CBD, whether it be here at the conference or at a store.
Yeah, I think it's the same limitation, yeah.
Still an issue.
Yeah.
For the credit card.
Well,
Is it CBD or THC?
oh, with the CBD, okay, yeah, no, I think.
CBD.
Yeah, okay.
Zero THC CBD products.
Right, okay.
Everybody in the last conference over here turned around and said to us, it's legal. Is that true
Right.
or is that not true?
Well, I can kind of chime in a little bit on,
Sales
some of
legal.
the.
So regardless of the banking issue, if you want to distribute, you have so many products, all right? What if you basically don't wanna set up a storefront, but you have patients? Because I'm not clinical as a physician, okay? I'm not referring, but so many of my colleagues that are referring, they got a lot of patients that are lost. And so the business that I have gone is more in the area of education. And education because Latin America opened up. And as a former medical graduate, when Mexico opened up, they're looking to us, okay, like saying, okay, Uruguay opened up. All these doctors, they don't know what they're doing. 89% of the physicians in the United States have a slight idea what they're doing.
They don't have any training in it.
So training, so
Yeah.
that's the route my business is going. Okay, so I wanna know if I consult with a patient, because he's got the referring doctor, and I push the business of saying, let me help you, okay? But then we got all these products out here. Is there gonna be a problem with banking, with doing consulting, or teaching, or anything like that, which is kind of like a sidekick, because it's a need.
Right. So that's a great question, because it gets into this area of sort of ancillary businesses and services, right?
That I'm looking for a niche that I like, that keeps me away from any problems as even a non-clinical physician.
Okay, so let me try, all right, so as I mentioned, the Treasury Department issued this guidance, okay, which is still in effect. And it said that if you as a bank service an individual or a business that derives any income from marijuana-related transactions, you are considered a marijuana-related business. Now let's play that out. You're Domino's Pizza, okay?
and you deliver to a dispensary, and they pay you in cash from their till, you just received marijuana, money that was generated by marijuana commerce. And now Domino's Pizza technically is a marijuana business. Obviously, that's not the way it's been construed or enforced, but the underlying point is that this is an area that is crying out for clarity as to what is a marijuana-related business that then implicates all of these banking issues. So the threshold question is, are you receiving any money from marijuana-related commerce, as opposed to you are servicing, providing a service to educate?
Educating.
Right.
You know, layperson's terms to the patients that are getting the referrals, because they tend to listen. I mean, I'm a doctor here, I'm a doctor in China.
Right.
You know
So
what I'm
in your
saying?
case, I would say that
So-
to the extent that, that any money that you are receiving for that, you are receiving for educational services.
So
Okay?
is that,
No, so that would not implicate what we're talking about here.
so then I'm.
Sir,
But,
sir,
right.
yeah.
Okay, let me help you clarify that. The question was about CBD particularly. I happen to be a national subject matter expert in this area. I'm a federally registered financial institution, and here's the truth. The bank have to do KYC, know your customer. They don't really understand the industry, they don't really understand CBD, so they just lump it all together. That's bank. Visa and MasterCard, if you call them, I'm an investor, I call them up, you can do the same thing. They will tell you, if you can find a sponsoring bank, then you're fine. Processing, the gentleman said there's no MCC code, that's true. The banks just would rather not deal in this industry because it's a hassle, it's a pain in the neck, it's all that with Green Bank and a few others. And the alternative, gentlemen, that with the comment, do not go offshore, do not misrepresent yourself. That's a huge problem. So CBD has been lumped into the same thing. I happen to process for T1, Harbor Touch, and Pieces for people like yourself. And if you're a real rare situation, you can get credit card processing, but most of them just don't want to be bothered. It's not that they can't do it, it's just for CBD, that it's just a pain in the neck and it's not worth it to them. So, not to be self-promoting, but I have a booth over here, I'd be happy to talk to you about that off channel here. I can help you set you to the right place, because the bank is not gonna work with you.
Questions? More questions?
I just real quickly,
Yeah.
one of the main issues with the merchant processing with CBD is your merchant processing fees are a lot higher than they are with just regular credit card merchant processing. You can find merchant processors out there that'll do it. You gotta do a little digging, they gotta work with you, but you're gonna be paying 8-10%, and it's,
Correct.
that'll kill you, that'll kill your margins.
Yeah, sir, or miss?
How quickly do you think the Department of Health is gonna finalize their various pieces of
Rules?
rules that are still outstanding?
Do you, I'll give you my estimate, track pretty carefully every day. If you don't have access or haven't looked at the Office of Medical Marijuana Use, maybe you probably have. I mean, it's a little hard to read.
It's obscure.
It's a little obscure on the website, but I anticipate, there's multiple rules. They're working through pesticides, labeling, packaging, chemicals, etc. And of course, then there's the one on new applications, NFTC applications. I believe that most will be done this summer. Right? Some of the non-controversial ones will be done and finalized. There's a statutory requirement and a structure of the administrative law in Florida. You post it. There's a certain posting time. Then there's a time to comment, and then they can finalize. It can get protested. It gets protested as a rule. It goes on for a long time. So I anticipate that most of it will be done really by August, except potentially the new application.
When do you think the new applications?
If they just had a rule hearing
Right.
last week. If they make no changes to the rule that they proposed, we have all this on our website, I can send it to you. They will be done in July, was the rule, first part, 10th of July, at which point there's a period in which new applications will be submitted within 42 days.
Okay.
If the rule is finalized and someone wants to protest it, then that starts another time clock and kicks it all back. I think that, I spent a lot of time with the Department of Health. They want to get this done. This could become a political issue come September, October. You know, we got a lot of campaigns out there going on, and you know, it could have an impact on that. So that's my best guess, gentlemen. Go ahead, sir.
So cryptocurrency, there's been a bunch of those popping up that's specifically related to medical cannabis industry, and there's been some countries who've gone the decriminalization route, and you know, you're buying stuff that they are investing in their own cryptocurrency for certain transactions. So when you're talking about moving that money as federally a no-no, and you can't move any money that's tied to marijuana sales and whatnot because of legality, is their ability to move cryptocurrency because it is not spelled out in that legislature or the governance, or is it because it's not a true currency to move either?
I'm sorry, are you asking why is it not used or being used?
No,
or-
I know it's being used, but why is it okay that they're allowed to transfer this to offshore banks and things like that, or offshore collections, and is that because they can't track it, or is that because it doesn't fall under the guidance set out by
Right.
the DOJ and the Treasury? Is it just a gray area that hasn't been addressed, or
Okay,
is
yeah.
it?
Right, so, yeah, I think, you know, cryptocurrency just in general is very much of a moving target in terms of how it falls into existing laws and regulations. It obviously is not specifically addressed, you know, in the Treasury guidance, so there's nothing, you know, directly on point as to whether and to what extent the marijuana business can accept cryptocurrencies. It is happening. I mean, I would just say, you know, the very fact of, you know, the sort of the anonymity of cryptocurrency and the fact that you don't necessarily know the provenance of that money could make it potentially, you know, more, you know, increase your risk exposure because, you know, for better or worse, cryptocurrency is a sort of a new way for, you know, criminals to, you know, move and divert money. So if you're a business, does it, you know, increase your risk exposure potentially? And additionally, in the eyes of a financial institution, for instance, you know, again, if you're trying to get a bank account, no bank is going to take you if they have any concerns that you are doing anything other than running your business entirely appropriately. And I'm not saying it's inappropriate necessarily to accept cryptocurrencies, but from the bank standpoint, that could be a red flag. So banks, bear in mind, can be extremely selective in terms of who they choose to do business with, precisely because of the imbalance of supply and demand. So those banks that are in this industry, they can choose, you know, best in breed. They can say, you know, I'll talk to 100 companies and I'll select one. And the one they're going to select is the one that falls all over themselves in terms of being compliant and showing that they're doing everything the correct way and that they're an open book to their financial institution. And if you're not, and the bank thinks that you're cutting corners, that you're not being fully transparent, you're just not going to get a bank account. So it really does put a premium on doing things the correct way. And also banks, you know, from a self-interest standpoint, again, going back to supply and demand, they can make a considerable amount of money in this industry because they can charge their marijuana customers fees and rates that they would never charge for any other corporate customer. And these businesses will gladly pay them because, or maybe not gladly, but they will pay them because the benefits of having a bank account are worth that. So long as you have that balance between supply and demand, the banks are in a very strong position in terms of leverage to be selective as to who they bank with, to cut your bank account off the second that they think that you might be doing something wrong, and to charge you a lot of money.
I want to add to that real quick and just let you guys know what's going on where this industry is really evolved and developed. We talked about banks; they will get into this space, and they will. credit unions. There's 3 of them in Washington State that are involved in the cannabis industry. Solal Credit Union, who I do all my banking with, my merchant fraud, everything is done through them, and they charge me a premium. They have over 1,000 cannabis clients in the state of Washington. They charge each of us over $500 a year, plus monthly fees based on the amount of money that we have in our bank accounts. So I'm paying almost $1,000 to the bank, and so there's 1,000 of us paying $1,000. There's $1 million in service fees they're getting. Plus I've got over $100,000 in my account. All these other guys have over $100,000 in their account. Now they have a lot of money to play with. So they are getting into the space eventually, because it's just all money. And they have to do their special compliance things, and I don't know what they're doing. I put you in touch with the people over there, but they are doing it legally, and it is working, and they are banking the industry.
Can I mention one thing? There are some, I'm tracking this banking thing for a long time, and we also have very strong interest in blockchain and digital currencies from another perspective, but there are companies that are trying to utilize not anonymous currencies, but dedicated tokens that don't fluctuate in value. That's really, the county of Los Angeles is using it now to pay their utility fees, right? So you have it's kind of a closed loop system. It's all agreed upon, set value. It's not anonymous. There are cannabis companies, merchant services are getting into that, trying to get into that space. You know, until the banking industry changes or becomes a little less risk averse or more compliant, that'll happen. I mean, it's moving that direction. Just the legislature is gonna work on a workshop on blockchain technology and digital currencies come January as well. Not specifically for this, but this is certainly one of the areas they fall. Yes, ma'am.
Somebody said that there's a bank in Orlando called Green Bank.
First Green Bank.
FDIC.
First Green Bank.
Yeah, that you can use.
Well, First Green Bank, I know well, we work very closely with them. They, for personal reasons, I won't worry with it, the personal reasons, the CEO, special needs kid, wife had seizures, finally, who's a doctor at the California, he said, listen, I want to try to do everything that John was talking about here with, knowing it's going to cost more time consuming, the risk is higher, but I want to see if we can bank the industry. So they developed a compliance system with some help from outside, and really methodically after a year, began to bank everybody in Florida. Unfortunately, they were purchased by a super regional bank, and they thought they had another bank that was going to take the cannabis accounts, and that fell apart, so they had to drop everybody. It was about 6 months ago. Very unfortunate. There are some other options here, and other folks are looking at Florida. It's as he said, there's Hyper's got a program. There's other programs out there. There are banks that I've talked to that they're very conservative by nature, right? That as you get into this and really talk about this compliance requirement, SARS reporting and KYC stuff, it's hard to get any feedback from the feds. First Green Bank went through a state banking audit and passed. Well, they talked. So credit unions, others, it's doable, but it's risky.
Yeah, just a couple quick points. We've been talking about the profit motive, and that, look, banks are businesses. They're not going to enter a market unless they know they're going to make money. But I would note another thing that we're starting to see in terms of the changing perception of this industry, even by banks, who again are some of the most conservative institutions and individuals. We're trying to sell them compliance to get in the marijuana industry. This is an industry that takes 6 months to requisition a stapler because they're so conservative. So there's a real sort of psychological tension between marijuana and banking, and it's a tough to bridge that gap. But I will note one thing. I've talked to a number of bankers who, again, they're conservative by nature. They tell me, listen, this was, on the ballot in my state. I voted against it. I don't support state legalized marijuana. But here's the thing. It just passed. It's here. It's a reality. So once it passes and once it's a reality, then you have a very stark choice. You can either allow this industry to have access to a financial institution, the financial institution, and operate like a real business, which means you have transparency into that business. You know where all the money's going. You can tax it at 100%. Or You exclude it from the financial system, and it operates like a black market. You have no idea where that money is going. And so just from a sort of a public service standpoint, I've talked to bankers who say, listen, I'm gonna take these customers on, if for no other reason, just to get the money off the street. And then to come back to the sort of the state of play, in Florida, I would just say that, there is no national marijuana industry. There are 30 separate state industries, all of which run and operate completely differently because they're all state run. And as a result, the regulatory environment can vary dramatically. I'm sorry?
It's fractured.
Yes, and but what that means is, you could have a much more hospitable banking environment in one state than you could have in another state. So, for instance, here in Florida, we have worked with a couple of financial institutions that wanted to get into this industry and got very, very close to doing so, but were told at the last minute by their state regulator on no uncertain terms, do not do this. So, don't assume that just because your state has, that has legalized marijuana, that means that it's going to be clear sailing. There are still regulatory bodies that have a lot of say that might not be hospitable to this, and we have seen that the banking regulators in this state have been a real problem towards getting banking access.
John, just to kind of go back, if I can, on one question related to the selectivity from the banking side, on the criteria, and looking at accounts as a prospective customer. What have you seen in terms of, when it comes to the criteria that they look at, when it comes to merchant services? So if a business, if they're looking at 100 different businesses to take on from a depository relationship perspective, how do they look at merchant services? So if there's any element of merchant services history, with a business, would that be criteria that would be a check off, or what have you seen in terms of, from that perspective? Obviously less than transparent, fully transparent merchant services, but say a business, an ancillary business, or a business touching the plant that wants to get a bank account, but they've been doing so. There has been some merchant services that have been involved in their transactional history. Is that an issue?
It is, and I would just say that there's no playbook here. I mean, we are in literally uncharted waters. It's incredible that I was involved in this in drafting federal policy. It's about been over 4.5 years, and if you had told me that in that intervening time there would not be any additional policy or guidance as to how to service a multi-billion-dollar industry, I would have thought you were crazy. I mean, if you look at the handbook that banks have to operate in, it's like a phone book, but you won't find a single page, a single word about how to bank the marijuana industry. So since the DOJ document that I worked on was rescinded, you have 4 pages from the Department of Treasury, and that's it. So to answer your question, banks are having to develop their own best practices, and because they're not getting anything in the way of guidance from the federal government. And so every bank sort of approaches this differently. Some have higher thresholds as to what constitutes, they won't take a business like an ancillary business. They won't take an ancillary business that derives more than 25% of its income from servicing marijuana. Some have, for some it's 50, for some it's 5. So there's no sort of stock answer that I can give you. But again, other than just to say that your chances and probability of gaining and obtaining a bank account increase considerably if you can determine or demonstrate to your bank that you have policies and procedures that you're following state law, and relevant federal policy.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a quick question. I heard a podcast about a company called PayQuick. Has anybody heard of that or used it? They're supposed to help you with all of
Right.
that.
So, so PayQuick, I mentioned before that there are 2 separate issues here. There's a payments issue, right? How do we take the cash? How do we make this a non-cash-based industry? And then there's the banking issue. PayQuick addresses the former. okay? So PayQuick is a way to engage in electronic, non-cash marijuana transactions. It does not address the latter. In other words, PayQuick won't get you a bank account, okay? So it is a, and I think they're used in the Northwest. So yeah, it is one of a number of payment solutions which are trying to create a non-cash way to engage in transactions.
Closed loop system,
Well-
you kind of agrees to.
One of the things that, he said they do is they do a site visit to make sure you're compliant with all the rules. You know, so that kind of made me think that they do help out on that end, as far as, ensuring that the relationship between you and the bank is all on the up and up.
Right, well, they have to, and this is why, you know, I always tell people who are skeptical of this industry, I mean, back before the Attorney General rescinded this, the Cole memo, I met with some of my former DOJ colleagues. I said, listen, I know you hate this industry. I mean, it's no secret, the Attorney General loathes this industry. But if you're skeptical of this industry, you should do everything possible to get the banks to service it, okay? Precisely because if a marijuana business has a bank account, then suddenly you have another institution that is looking in and has responsibility for and liability for to make sure that business is running compliantly, okay? So if you think, oh, you know, this, you know, legalized marijuana, it's all just a pretext, you know, and it's, you know, it's a way to commingle, you know, drug money and drug and all, give them a bank account, because then the bank has to make sure, no, those are all legitimate transactions. No, this business is running compliantly. So, you know, from a law enforcement standpoint, from a transparency standpoint, you know, anyone who is skeptical about this industry should say, please bank them all, because then the bank is on the hook. And so, yes, because there is a bank involved, it doesn't mean that with PayQuick, they have a bank, so their bank, yes, is potentially liable. And that's why they have to go out to a site visit and make sure that this business is running compliantly.
Thank you.
Any other